welcome back to another devlog. This week is number 51. Another week has passed by, and now we can show off our what we've done this week. Here again is the total scope of the first level so far. You see it's grown a little bit more. So we'll focus in on what we did this week here. Let's take a look at this over here. So what we did here, we finished up this sector here. We added a bunch of details and stuff, kind of filled it out. A bunch of props to kind of, so it's not so empty. Little cover things to hide behind and whatnot. And then we finished up this little back area here. We ironed out all the, or I ironed out all the floor tiles, aligned them, added some railing, and then more props and stuff. And this area here, this is where you collect your first weapon and shield, as you know, pertaining to the initial game design prototype. So I wrapped up this sector finally. This was one of the larger ones, and I moved on to the last sector of this scene here. So going in here, this is an external scene again with rain effects, as you saw in the demo. And I was able to complete this one just like the other ones, the process of laying out the random tiles, and with my new tools, it made it, it saved me a step of having to go and manually delete all the extra tiles it generated. But I got my different height variations, and then I began to apply my process and polish, and I added a more open background. So some walls here, but mostly open with background objects and lighting to provide. So kind of taking an additional step forward in my background scenery kind of technique, and applied, generally what I usually do, props and railings and stairs and colliders and testing all that, and then applying, the actual enemy positions, enemy routes, and then applying the actual different player routes through this segment, and then from there, like adding environmental props that are placed strategically where you can actually hide behind them, given the actual enemy patrols throughout this area. Your goal is to make it all the way to this end and, collect a key card. And here's another power-up station for combat. Once you get the key card, then you make your way here. The key card allows you to access the elevator and transition to the next level here. So got that all done. I moved on to the, this scene was wrapped up here, and I transitioned to making the next scene. This is the second to last scene, and it has a little bit of a different look to it. Here we go. So I roughed out the floors and added the rough walls and the, typical stage process according to the initial schematic, initial prototype design. And I got the first VCAM in, and it created a new scene manager, a new sector controller. And then I got to this stage where it was time to connect the two scenes together. And this time was a little different because we're not just traversing stairs like usual, we're actually traversing through an elevator. So I had to get started on new functionality for transitioning with an elevator. And when I started with this elevator, it was just a basic shell. It didn't really do anything. There was no built-in functionality. So I had to, over the next several days, um, I had to take my logic from my existing doors. My existing doors would have a collider, and when the player crossed the collider, it would open automatically. It's a simple door functionality, but this one is a little different where the door is closed. It won't do that. I had to add functionality where it'll only open if you interact with this button. So my prototyping work paid off. I had previously done interactables. Okay, so here we are back again. I'll set up. So now you can actually, it won't open automatically, so you can hit the button here and then it'll open up. And also other niceties like if you're in this, now the collider zone, if you're in the collider zone, it won't close on you. And you can go on here, it won't close on you because you're in the zone, and then you can interact. But if you go out of the zone, it's on an automatic timer, and then it'll just, for like 5 seconds, yeah, it'll just close. So this interaction here, um, and then during the next day, the interaction to actually interact here and hook everything up to where um, it'll actually move the elevator in a certain direction depending on, you know, depending on the actual, and then using the fade out and then hooking up the scene transition load to the different scene and testing out, like opening the door, so loading the new scene, other things like fading out this, so you can actually fading out this front wall, having a, and then fading it in when you enter the elevator, getting the actual the V cam right because you're at a different angle here. I was getting some strange, some wonky behaviors. Things go wrong when you're shifting between V cams, when you're changing the actual pitch of the rotation between the two. I've seen that less dramatically with the other, like through the hallways, but here it would go really bad. Depending on, if you're not centered, it would rotate very wildly. So the system was off. So the fix for that was actually to set the camera. Since it's just a small area, it was actually set the camera as a fixed position, and that solved the problem. So it's kind of like the camera doesn't move, but it actually transitions nicely in the rotational. So Um, just getting everything working. So adding implementation so it'll work both ways. So when you're loading this scene, setting the actual, so doing a lot of systems work. You can see all these options now that I had to implement, like main control, scene loading. I also implemented functionality that would actually allow you to specify the length of the shaft, and it would generate a prefab and stack it to a certain distance. And from this distance, I can do calculations to say to actually lerp the platform movement over time with a curve, so it's not so linear. It's more like a natural elevator kind of deal. Um, just a lot of just a lot of work in building this elevator controller, hooking everything up with scene loading. Kind of like I did before, I had to adapt my level manager scene loading process for these different types since it's not stairs, so there's a different process. There's not really like transfer platforms and such, but I kind of used and adapted the transfer platform logic to facilitate kind of the same deal with a different type of elevator. So it kind of, and I made sure it was all clean and refactored. So a lot of systems work getting this elevator work. During like the third day, I was surprised it took so long, but you'd be surprised on how many little things it takes to implementing an elevator. This is my first shot at doing some sort of like vertical movement of a platform. that the player is standing on. And so on Wednesday I got everything, or no, on Thursday I have got everything working as far as the actual scene loading up and down. So it works both ways, um, up and down, and everything was connected, kind of like the stairs. But it still wasn't 100%. One of the issues was during the elevator ride, you look at the shadow, and there is this weird sort of jumping issue where it's like a slight the elevator would move and like the physics collision system would be like, oh, the elevator moved, let me it would act like you're falling, micro falling, and it didn't really look natural. Like you see that in some of the older video games where you're in an elevator and it's kind of bouncing, he's kind of character's kind of bouncing slightly. That's because of the physics collision. It's the floor is moving either up or down, and then the collider has to constantly adjust, and it's not too smooth. So the fix for that is to I tried suggestions from AI and it's like different solutions, but the real solution was to during the process, as soon as you hit the button, is to transfer the actual character game object inside the actual level scene underneath the actual elevator platform as a child. You can actually probably see this taking place if we do this in real time. So elevator, platform, platform, like this. Yeah, see how it shifts over here now. So this kind of breaks a little bit of rules of the architecture, but it does so temporarily because you're in this constrained box. This has a bunch of implications. Say if you're unloading a scene, you might accidentally unload the character, but when the ride ends, or in between the loading, it shifts the character back properly back to its own scene. So it's pretty seamless, and that solves the issue of vertical platform motion. No more issue there. I did catch a strange bug like that was happening. It wouldn't happen on the first ride cycle, but what would happen um, on the second ride cycle, when I'm repositioning the character on a scene load, it would register that difference as like a fall height. It would, in the vector system, would register it like as not grounded to is grounded, and it would apply fall damage. So I had to go and root out that bug and actually overwrite the default behavior a little bit to kind of ignore that as you're repositioning the character. That wasn't an issue previously when we were repositioning, but it set out such a difference where the system registers as a fall and applies damage. So I couldn't figure it out, but the player was actually dying when you moved the position of the platform. So got that sorted out. Everything's looking good. So it was just a lot of work over the 3 days to get all these things working together. I had to implement something here where it's like, you know, depending on the initial load state, does the door start and stay open? And a lot of different options to make it all work seamlessly the way I want it to. Yeah, just a bunch of different work. Like a lot of polish with, delays and move speed. When you hit the button, it either closes or opens with a slight delay. So a lot of, just a hundred little things. Like I said before, you would be surprised how many things a simple elevator ride functionality takes to implement. There's just so many, like one of the things when you start the elevator, you want to put up these colliders around this platform because if you are able to go against the walls, you'd be jumping around. Things that you never think about in games. It seems like such a simple thing, riding an elevator and transitioning scene, but there's a lot of work that goes into just this. And then, things you don't think about, like interacting with this, when the ride starts, oh, can you interact again? You shouldn't be able to, because that'll send system commands and it'll screw things up. So you have to disable that. Um, just every little thing um, that you could imagine. Oh, things like you know, when scene load transition, like depending on where you were as to place you in the position that you were relative to where the scene loaded. Yeah, just the whole process, making sure everything is functioning how it should from start to finish, back and forth. There's just no issues with it. So I think I've kind of exhausted talking about the elevator. Um, and that's pretty much the majority of the week. I finished up the last sector, and then yeah, the majority of the week was taken up doing this darn elevator. But I think it was worth it, pulling off this functionality. And so for the last part of the final of the week, I worked on just going back to the regular process of this new scene, this new sector. So I polished off, you know, worked on the walls a bit, a lot, just the regular process, and I got pretty decently far. But this new sector is still a work in progress, and that's what I'll be working on next week, finishing up the process for this new sector and this new scene. So stay tuned for that. Um, this is the last medium-sized scene, and then there's one more small scene, and then the level's done. So, um, yeah, that's about it for this week, and we'll call it a day and check in with you next time. All right, see you later. Bye.